Hello and welcome to EduCurious. We have a special guest with us today, Jennifer Hernandez. She is a new-ish classroom teacher.
Mhm.
Previously, she was a beautician, and we are so glad to have her on our show today. So, welcome, Jennifer. I want to hear all about your transition from hair to students.
It's been a transition. Thank you for having me. Um, I for 24 years decided that I was going to be a hairdresser. I went to school and didn't really feel like I was going to do anything with my degree, so I went to hair school and I'd figure it out when I grew up. And then at 48, 7, I got an opportunity to start teaching and jumped into it, and I should have done it years ago. I love it. Ironically, I love middle school. I don't know that I could do it. I could not do elementary school. I'm not that lovey and cuddly. I'm a little more real. We'll say real. So it's been a very interesting jump from being in hair to education and being responsible for not only molding minds but responsibility of keeping them safe and keeping them healthy and worrying about how they're mentally doing and how they're educationally doing. It's been a big jump, but I love it.
We are so fortunate to have you on our campus, and the kids really resonate with you. They feel comfortable with you. I've seen you build
Mhm.
relationships with students. It's very powerful. So tell me what maybe your biggest attribute is building relationships, and that is also important in your previous career as the relationships. But tell me how
Mhm.
those two worlds intersect.
Well, in hairdressing, you have somebody that comes to you and knows that they want something. You have to figure out if they want something because there's a big change in their life, or if there's something that they're worried about, because as a society, outwardly is what we portray to the world. And if we don't feel that what we're portraying outwardly to the world is what we want to portray, we get our hair done. Or if we're having something major life happen, we get our hair done, because it's the one thing, no matter how crazy your life is, that you can control. It's very similar in teaching, because you have to, every day that your class walks in, go, okay, let's assess this situation. Let's see what everybody's going through, because everyone is going through something, whether they're doing it inwardly, outwardly, aggressively, or quietly. But you, as a teacher, have to be able to look and go, okay, where are you? What are you doing? How are you doing this? And so it's very similar in hair, because you peel back the walls and you peel back everything and you get the raw person. And then you kind of go, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're at. And it's the same thing with kids. When a kid comes in and puts his head down, there's something there. If that's the first time they've ever done that, whether they were up all night because they were studying or worried about a test, or they were up all night because their parents were fighting, or whether they were up all night because they were worried about, oh, we're in middle school, a girl. But knowing what those pieces are is what I brought from hair, because you assess a little differently, I think, when you have never had an educational background, but you've had a customer service background. You look at things very differently, because I first assess emotional and then assess educational.
The way you prioritize it is, I think, why you've had such great success since you've started with the students. Is that way the priority, the person first, and then the
Mm-hmm.
learning.
Well, I also walked in not having education background. So my logic was, I'm going to run this class like I run my family. I'm a mom. I raised boys, which anyone that's raised boys knows that's a whole different ballgame. But I wanted them, when I walked in, I knew what I was going to expect as a mom, and I knew that it would translate into a teacher, because expectations are the first thing that kids have to have. If they know clear cut expectations and what is okay and what is not okay, they tend to just kind of meld into it, because every human wants parameters and they want to know what they're doing and where they're going and how it's going, and they don't want surprises. And that's parenting too, because you have to very much have very set, strict values, and this is okay, this is not okay. And so that's kind of how I walked into it, because I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never taught a class before.
So tell me a little bit about how you structure your classroom management style. You mentioned just being in tune with their needs and letting them be a lot of times, but also providing that very firm structure. So expand on that.
So I, every day with my bell work, because I'm an English teacher, I think that kids need to be able to speak their minds within, I mean, not speak their minds, but I think, and so my bell work every day has nothing to do with English. Some days it'll be, hey, how's your week going? What's something that's worrying you right now? One time I asked them to describe a snack that was their favorite snack without telling me what the snack was. They loved that. Who knew? But I think them being able to just kind of vent first thing when they walk into class. I've had them say, I hate bell work. I don't want to do bell work and I'm not going to do bell work today. But I think with them being able to be themselves a little bit and then go into hey, this is where we need to work. I need this from you. I believe that they turn around and give it to me more because they know that when I look at them and go, I'm going to lecture for 10 minutes and then you're going to do the work. They tend to respond better to that because, again, they know what they're doing. There's a plan, there's logic to it.
You said a lot of times these kids don't have anything in their lives really that they can control. So being able to know what's coming next is a safety thing. And also, I heard you say you let them know what their expectations are, but you meet them where they are. That is key.
Yeah.
What you said.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I think I have such a connection and I get such a connection with my kids because first and foremost, I make sure I know what they're into. Whether I like it or not, I know when they come in and say a slang word, what it means. And I know who the famous singers are. And I think meeting them on their level also allows them to trust me more.
You're not trying to be like them because there's a difference. I've seen teachers be like them, try to be their bro. You're not like that, but you take time to get to know what's important to them.
That's big. And I think when they trust you, but this is not just teaching. When kids trust you and they'll respect what you want them to do. And if I can look at them and go, hey, get this done, and then we can do something fun. Or you guys worked really hard this week. Let's play Gimkit today. But if they never see any of the joy or the happiness, and if I'm not joyful and happy, they catch that vibe. They know. They're middle schoolers. Their life is strange already. They don't want to walk into a classroom with a teacher that is staunch, and that's not who I am. I can't be that person. I'm not that person. Like if they're super silent, it scares me. I'm not quiet, so I don't expect silence out of them. And they move, and I don't mind it. And they get fidgety, and when they get fidgety, I go, all right, we're doing a brain break. Everybody take 5 minutes, get up and dance, because it's a lot. It's 7 periods a day of sitting. That's hard. That's hard for me as a teacher. It's even harder for 12, 13, and 14-year-olds. Very, very much. So I think just knowing and adapting, teaching, that's what I've learned from teaching. Adapt on a dime all the time.
What has been one of the biggest surprises going from you had kids in school, but now you are a teacher in the school? It's a different perspective. What's been some of your biggest?
Yeah. The biggest surprise I think I have had is how much the kids want to know. And the amazing thing to me, one of my bell work questions one time was, what do you wish that the schools taught you? And most of the responses were budgeting, taxes, how to cook. And one of my students said, I am pretty sure I don't need to know how to conjugate a verb for the rest of my life, but I need to know how to boil water. And I'm like, you know, that's pretty profound. I mean, they do have to learn how to conjugate a verb, but there's so many things they want to learn and they want to be better at that they don't verbalize. But when they are better, you can see it all over. When they learn something new or when something clicks, that's what surprised me, is because I know my kids were always like, we're just going to go sit in a class. But to see how much they actually want to learn kind of surprised, because I figured I was going to walk into a situation where they were just going to buck the system and they didn't really want to learn. They just had to be there because their parents told them. But they do want to learn. They do want to get better. They do want to be better. I think they just don't quite completely know how to yet. And that's kind of where we come in as educators.
You gave them permission to ask a question, or you gave them permission to say what they wanted.
They're on the precipice of adulthood, but they're not quite adults, and they
Mhm.
can't really do anything for themselves. And they can, but they can, and they want more freedom, but no one ever asks, what do you want? How do you think we should do this? How do you think you can best get what out of? Because there have been days that I've been teaching and it's been blank, and it's just like watching zombies stare at you, and I'll just stop and go, okay, why are you all blank? Well, we've learned this before, we all know this. I'm like, wait a minute, who all, you guys can, like, if I gave you a test right now, they're like, yeah, we know that. I'm like, okay, well, what don't you know? What do you want to learn instead? Because if you know this and you can do this, where are you having a problem? And that's the adapting. Because if I have a classroom full of 25 people and they're all looking at me like, yeah, duh, we know. Why am I continuing to pound that when they don't know this, but they do know this? So why am I teaching this? Why teach them 500 times the same thing when there's other things that they don't really know? But you have to ask them that.
And it might differ from class to class. You've got to
It does.
those learning gaps and fill in the void.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the teaching practice is an art. We sort of learned it just by interpersonal relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's a big difference between having had, not to negate having had an educational background, but I can stand back and go, wait a minute, I understand that's how it's been done, but why is it being done that way? Why does it have to be that way? Can it also be this way? It's strange walking into an educational world when you've never been in there and thinking, as someone who's been in a business world, you think from a business standpoint, I think, where if in a business you're running a business and something's not working, you figure out why it's not working and you switch it. And so
Absolutely.
thinking that way, I think probably helped you too when you started, because I think you see problems from a business standpoint rather than well, this might be a problem, but we still have to do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is what's laid out to be. I think from a business standpoint, we go, wait a minute, let's see what's a different direction.
What's been some of your biggest challenges on that note?
If you are not from an education background, everyone in education thinks that you know everything that they do.
You made a really good point. There are a lot of people coming into our education world, and it is because it is such a fulfilling career. I have never felt more like I was doing something worthwhile and meaningful. And I wouldn't change that for the world. What do you think we need to do to make that process easier and be ready to accept these people that are sort of like, they're not native to education, they're foreigners to our world? What is the process? How could we make it better?
And I just think there needs to be a little more check-in, not necessarily aggressively. And the mentor, I think every job does a mentor, but I think instead of having one mentor, you could have more than one that goes, hey, I'm checking to see if this is good with you. I think that there should be more of a touching base with people in areas, not just a, hey, how you doing? But I think that if we had people that said, hey, we just got an email about making sure that this is done. Do you know how to do that? It's a whole different world. I love it. I wish I would have done it years and years and years ago. If I would have known I would have enjoyed it this much, I would have jumped ship years ago. I jumped into a whole other career. And now I'm like, golly, I could have been doing this for the past 20 years instead.
So I really want to switch gears a little bit and talk about more on a personal level. You are married to a cop, and I'd like to hear your perspective on some of our school safety. Because one, from a parent perspective, because you had that world, and then from hearing what's important, cop world, and now being in the classroom and seeing it and seeing that side of it.
Well, I, as a parent, would get an email or a call. We had a lockdown today. My first thought was, my kids aren't safe. How are they going to protect my kid? Transition into being a teacher and seeing how we're trained to protect and I can only speak for me as a teacher and a mom. Those then are my kids. If something happens, those are my children, and I will protect them like they're my children. as a parent, before I got into education, I didn't know that teachers thought like that about my child, but we do. Those are my babies, and I will go down before you will. 100%. Now, from being married not only to a cop, but he's also a school resource officer, which makes it a whole other ballgame. Before he was a school resource officer, even our kids growing up are very aware of their surroundings. We have always taught them, and it's because of his job, pay attention to who's around you, pay attention to what's going on. Always have your eyes open. Make sure that you always know an exit plan. And that's just from him being an officer, because he was also in the military, so that's the way he thinks. So our kids also think that way. And it's very interesting when we're in a place and all of them try to fight over looking at the door. But I digress. Being a teacher married to a police officer, I'm much more safety conscious. I make sure my door is always locked. I always know that at any moment, anything could happen. So what would I do? So I'm much more aware of who's walking on campus. And my classroom is a second floor and I can see the front parking lot. And so I'm very aware of paying out, and it's being married to a cop. I see who's walking. And if I see somebody that I'm not used to, I'll call the office and say, hey, just a heads up, there's somebody walking through the front lawn, and I don't know what that is. It's probably no one. However, being married to a cop, you're hyper vigilant about that. Now, on the flip side, with him being a school resource officer, he is uber education vigilant, because he deals with safe schools and he knows the protocols and he knows what's supposed to be done. So with that, I also know, you kids don't open the door, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this. Make sure that you're doing this, make sure that this is going on. It's easier to be preventative than reactive. And I make sure that I am over preventative so that I don't have to be reactive. I've always been very security conscious, but now in education, it's more so greater good security, not just my own. Making sure that I pay attention to how long my kids are gone. Also, being very aware of moods, because unfortunately, a kid's mood can change at the drop of a dime. I'm much more apt to overprotect than under, because it's easier to be preventative than reactive.
You've been programmed over years of this. You know what questions to ask and what signs to look for.
If you've ever been in education, you know when something's going on. Like right. When a kid changes drastically, there's something going on. Whether it's family, whether it's friends, there's something, but you know. And so when you go, hey, what's going on? And there's no response, it tends to throw up red flags in me. Go, okay, do I take this an extra step, or will they open up to someone else, or is it they just are not ready to talk and they will come back? I have a very interesting thing in my classroom. I have a let it go box, and it's a box with a lid. And I tell them, if you are going through anything, if you just need to tell me something, if you just need to rant, put it in the box and let it go. Once a week, I take them out and I read them. They know I read them. They've asked me, well, what happens what if there's a cuss word on it? And I'm like, listen, I'm a mandatory reporter, which means if you're going to hurt yourself, or if you're going to hurt someone else, or if you are in danger or someone is in danger and you're telling me, then I have to report that. If you say, damn it, on a piece of paper, I don't think I'm going to get mad at you, because of all things, I'm not picking that battle, because they're opening up to me and they're telling me what's going on, so I can at least be a safe space for them. I'm not going to be mad if you're angry and your words are colorful. I mean, to an extent. I mean, they can't go on an Eddie Murphy rant, but they love that box. And it is almost every week is almost full. Is it a lot of my boyfriend made me mad? Is it my mom and dad are fighting? I've gotten that. I'm just hungry. But they're opening up. And I think that's another thing that I do that I have learned from my husband being in law enforcement. If you can get them to tell you, you have half the battle. Because honestly and truthfully, the reason why we need SROs is because of mental health issues mostly. And if they have a place where they can spew it, we only have one mental health counselor. She needs help too. But I think that's being in law enforcement, because there's a very personal side of my husband's career, especially being an SRO, where he has to make tough decisions. And he has said multiple times, if I had known, this wouldn't have been the decision I would have made.
The information in that box can help you prevent something really big later.
And that's why I've had it. They'll tell me all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to know about your boyfriend. But, I'd rather him talk than not say anything.
I want to thank everyone for joining us on EduCurious. This episode was all about Jennifer Hernandez, who is not from the educational world, but is thriving in it. A couple takeaways is wish I would have gotten into it sooner. Build
100%.
the relationships first before you're worried about all the learning standards. And teachers really do love and care for and want to protect their students like they are their own kids. And so just appreciating that. I love the idea about the mentor check-in, the support structure. There are a lot of good ideas. So I appreciate you so much being on this. Thank you. And y'all at home, join us next time on EduCurious. See you later.